We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, welcome to the Right Stuff Matters podcast. I'm your host, Michael Miller. We are back after being in the G3 conference. It was now been a couple of weeks since the G3 conference. And I am joined by the lovely Erin Miller also.
Hi, how's it going?
So I guess before we get started about talking about G3 conference, first, I want to talk about an event we're doing this week. So this Thursday, so only a couple of days away, we're doing an event to talk about freedom in education. And it's going to be at Reston Bible Church, right? Starts at 6:45, and we're going to have a whole panel of discussions on essentially the freedom of in education, particularly focused on homeschool, private school, and the freedoms to have a choice in your kids' education.
Right. So. Yeah, we're going to be talking about school choice, voucher programs, and just educating our delegates or future delegates on some of the things that the constituents actually want, so that they have a good idea what they're getting into.
Yeah, and really it's a town hall meeting, right? So we're going to offer opportunity for people to ask questions. We'll have a live Q&A, have a panel discussion. Going to have some good speakers there. Scott Woodruff from the Homeschool Legal Defense Association will be there to speak. He'll be on the panel, as well as Ian Pryor from Fight for Schools, and several other advocates for school choice. Some of them are actually running for office. That just happens to be what they're doing.
Right.
But they've always been advocates for education. I'll be on there as well. I'll be moderating. So be a good time. So if you live in the Northern Virginia area, make sure you go register. Join us on Thursday, 6:45. We'll also be live streaming that as well. So excited for that. And we were really excited for G3 conference.
Yes.
And now we're back.
We are back. It was a long 2 weeks. We were gone for 2 weeks, but G3 conference was 3 full days, basically, for us.
Yeah, but good times. Got to see a lot of people that we haven't seen in a while, at least in person. Big names that are out there that everybody will know. Vody Bacham, Daryl Harrison, who else?
Walker.
Virgil. Yep, we saw them. Got to see Tom Askell. Got to see Hannah Askell, Whitney, both offenders. Tom Buck. Some other surprises, like Jenna Ellis was there.
Yep.
That was really good to meet her and talk to her for a little while. Got to see our good friend Ray Rhodes as well, going around signing books for everybody. And they actually sold out of the book.
They did. Again, every year they have sold out of his books. Both books.
So that was good to see him. Got to see Paul Cox and his wife from RefToons. We actually did several live podcast interviews while we were there, right, with Paul Cox talking about his latest book that he did, which is an illustrated version of the catechisms, which is really well done. He talked a little bit about that and just the whole inspiration for why he creates those books. And we also did interview with Nathaniel Jolly from Truth Be Known podcast. Tom Buck we did on the last day in the morning before it was all over with. So that's out there as well. Good conversation with him. And one with Ray Rhodes. So 4 podcast interviews live at the G3 conference talking about different topics. So go and check those out. Those are all live now. You can watch the video or listen to the podcast on everywhere that
Everywhere, yeah.
we publish to. So iTunes, Buzzsprout. Just go to the website. You'll see it. WriteStuffMatters.com. So really good discussions. Very good preaching. Great panel discussions there. And nobody said anything about the SBC, right?
I don't know. I don't know.
That was not on anybody's mind about what's going on in the SBC. That's for a different podcast.
Right.
We have a lot of things we want to talk about on this episode, but we did really, before we get started into some other things, we did want to mention just the G3 conference. We had a great time, got to meet a lot of really good people that we had never met before who stopped by our booth, learned more about our ministry, learned about the podcasts, and yeah, anything else memorable about G3?
Well, meeting Pastor Marungi from Kenya was actually quite memorable because we actually learned that he knows a few of the pastors that we've given Kindles to. And he would love to partner with us in a way to get pastors that are part of his training center every year Kindles and libraries. So that was a very memorable moment.
Yeah.
Of the conference for me. All the networking is always so fun. And I stood in a lot of lines trying to get books signed and talk to certain people.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a good time. 6,400 people. The place was packed. And all right there in downtown Atlanta. One of the things that I always thought was neat, especially about G3, going back to the first G3 conference we ever went to, is that you've got all these people, and they're listening to really good preaching. They all have their Bibles out, for the most part. Some of them are marking them up. And you have them all gathered together in kind of the main part. And then all the way in the back, you always have like these baby gates and blankets out on the floor, and kids are crawling around and are there just playing while their parents are listening to really good preaching. So it really is a family conference. I mean, we had little kids that are coming to our booth, getting candy and
The stamps.
getting the stamps, all of that. So it really is a family conference for as many people as are there.
Yeah, what was really cool was at the RefToons table, they had coloring sheets and crayons for the kids to do while the parents shopped and looked at the books and everything. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, it definitely was. So, unfortunately, we're going to have 2 years before we have another G3 conference. However, there are several regional conferences that will happen. Maybe they'll have one in Virginia. That would be great, or somewhere nearby that we can attend. The first one I think is in January, back down in Atlanta, but it'll be 2 more years before there's a big conference.
Right, the next one's only about 700 people.
Right.
Yeah.
So G3, great time. If you want to watch the sessions, which I would highly recommend, I think they said those will be coming out in the next couple of weeks, so they'll be posted on their YouTube channel and I think on the website, G3 Ministries. I think it's g3min.org. You can look at all the different sessions that were out there. I'm not sure if they have the breakout sessions. I know all the main sessions will. I think some of the breakout might be available on there, but be on the lookout for that. And really some good messages that were there that are worth going back and listening to.
Definitely.
So we've got a lot of topics to cover. There's a lot going on, and so we're going to take a quick break. But when we come back, we're going to talk about Loudoun County Public Schools, what's going on there, and what's going on with mandates and everything that's involved with that. So stick around. We'll be right back. We'll cover both those topics. All right, folks, we are back. So, like I said, Loudoun County, Virginia, we seem to have been on the news a lot in the last 8 to 9 months.
Way too much.
And today is no different. We were in the news again. There was a school board meeting today. Actually went to that school board meeting and spoke. You get a minute, so you don't get a lot of time to talk.
No.
I mean, you get 1 minute to talk about some things that are serious issues that are going on within the school board. And something big actually happened this past week. It actually was, the information came out. But this was an issue that actually had happened already, and it went all the way back to May 28th. Some of you might be familiar with the June 22nd school board meeting that we had. It was one of the largest. I think there were 250 people, I think, or something like that.
Something like that. We weren't actually there, but for that one.
Yeah, we were out of town. Actually, we were at the SBC conference.
Right.
The convention meeting, the annual meeting, which, you know, had its own explosions happening at it. But
it's a drama-packed week.
It certainly was, both in Nashville and in Loudoun County.
Yeah.
And if you watched what was going on at that particular school board meeting, that's where you had a lot of media there. You had a lot of people there. It was maybe the second or third school board meeting that they had actually opened up to the public to come back into the room in person.
Right.
And you had people clapping. And as a
No,
result of
jazz
people
hands.
clapping, yeah, and not doing jazz hands, they shut down the school board meeting. They kicked people out. And it was right before a man was a resident who was there at the school board meeting. He was about ready to speak, and he was there to speak about an assault that had happened against his daughter
Right.
in the school. And he was bringing that up not only for the reason that the fact that it was not taken care of in the school at all. It was not reported.
Right. And they were trying to take care of it in-house.
That's right, internally. They wanted
Yeah.
this, they said, we're just going to take it internally. Although the superintendent is required to report any incident like that.
Yeah.
And he failed to do it. They wanted to, like you said, take care of it internally. And this parent was frustrated about the lack of attention to this, which we would too.
Absolutely.
Anybody who had that happen to their own daughter would want to get it taken care of.
Yeah.
But they were trying to just basically sweep it under the rug, not take care of it. And the reason for it is because the offender was a transgender male who shouldn't have been in the women's locker room.
Right.
And they wanted to pass this policy 80-40 so badly, which would allow a transgendered student or teacher to be able to use whatever bathroom they want, whatever locker rooms they wanted. And they wanted to pass that so badly that they swept this under the rug.
They hid it.
Yeah, because they knew that that could be used as evidence to say what many of us had been saying for a long time.
Well, and the superintendent was actually asked spot on in previous school board meetings whether or not they had any accounts of something like this happening. And they either didn't answer or they lied and said no so that they could continue to push 80-40 through the
Right.
pipeline.
Which they did pass,
They
right?
did.
Yeah. So they lied about it. They covered it up because they wanted to push a political agenda.
Right.
So Fight for Schools, which is an organization here, started in Loudoun County because of this, because of just the school board issues or all the school issues within Loudoun County. They actually put out a press release, I guess it was yesterday, after an article came out by the Daily Wire. So if you're interested in the article, go and take a look at the Daily Wire. You can find it, or you can go to my Twitter feed, or go to Ian Pryor or Fight for Schools, and you'll see it there if you haven't already. But they put out a press release yesterday from Fight for Schools, which essentially went to summarize everything that happened and everything that article describes. And in that they said, quote, that the Daily Wire detailed a shocking story of Loudoun County public school officials covering up sexual assault of a teenage girl that took place in a bathroom at Stonebridge High School, May 28, 2021. According to the report, the young girl's father was arrested at the June 22nd, 2021 school board meeting after being antagonized by a woman who not only claimed his daughter was lying, but also threatened to ruin his business. He's a plumber.
Yeah. Wow.
It says this man had since become the face of so-called violence, quote unquote, at school board meetings. And that incident of him being arrested was actually cited in the National School Board Association letter that went to the Department of Justice, or the Attorney General, asking the Department of Justice to investigate these violent parents, these terrorist parents. He was cited in that report, in that letter.
Right, because actually what really happened was he had some words with another person there who was on the other side of the political aisle, if you want to say.
Well, they were in favor of 80-40
80-40, right.
and pushing that.
And they were sharing words, and the sheriff was trying to clear the room and apparently grabbed his arm and he just yanked it away. And that ensued with him being tackled and
Yeah.
and taken out. It wasn't anything to do with being violent or anything like that. Nobody at that school board actually got violent.
No. Well, but they've redefined violence. Violence has now become about saying anything that is against the policies that are being pushed by a school or by any sort of town
Right.
board,
Well,
city board,
didn't you
whatever.
know we're terrorists now?
Yes. Yes, we're all terrorists
Yeah.
because we push back, because we use words.
Right. Stand up for our freedoms.
So, if that wasn't bad enough, let's just add a little bit more to this in summarizing, back to the press release here. And again, this is all coming out of the Daily Wire article. It says, quote, "To make matters worse, the boy who committed the assault was quietly moved to another school where he proceeded to sexually assault a second girl just last week."
Right. Yep.
So they took and they swept the first incident under the rug so that they could pass this policy 80-40 to allow any child, any staff, faculty, anybody at the school to be able to use whatever bathroom and locker room they felt like they were that gender that particular day. So they swept that under the rug. They moved this student to another place, didn't take care of the sexual assault against a girl in the locker room, and now they committed it again.
Right.
And to even add more to that, the person who's sweeping it under the rug is none other than the school superintendent, Scott Ziegler,
Right.
who, at the June 22nd meeting, and it's recorded, you can go out and watch the video, one of the school board members, prior to them passing this 80-40 policy, asked the question, have we ever had any assaults in any of the bathrooms
Right.
or the locker rooms? And his response was, well, we've never had one in the bathrooms. He left out the word "and locker rooms," which was the original question.
Yeah, that's
Which makes
not
you
dirty
wonder.
at all.
Because the incident happened in the locker room, not in the bathroom. It begs the question, okay, did he leave out that intentionally?
Probably. I mean, it's all in the wording.
Right. Because they knew that that would be one of the biggest arguments against passing this policy, because that's what many of us had been saying
Right.
and advising people that
It's
this would lead
opening up.
to assaults.
Right. It's opening up for assaults on
That's right.
girls, and I mean, even in the younger schools, it's opening it up for even boys. I won't cut them out. It's entirely possible. Staff members go in, choose whatever restroom they want. I mean,
And I mean, who's to say this won't happen again?
right,
Because they can go to wherever they want.
right, and the school's probably just looking at it as, oh, well, we can't discriminate, so we just moved schools, the person from one school to another, because they're transgender, and
Yeah.
you can't discriminate against them anymore. They should have, if it was a normal situation and not a transgender issue, the person would have been expelled. and required to move to a different county or something like that.
Right. Well, it should have been reported to the police,
Well, yeah,
who then
absolutely.
investigate and bring up charges.
Right. Now there's charges.
Right. But if this had been taken care of after the first incident, then we wouldn't have now another girl
Right.
who had to go through that.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, this is the people who are supposed to be elected officials who are supposed to be providing a safe environment for our students. And they knew that the vast majority of the community was against this policy being passed.
Oh, yeah. It's a very small minority who are pushing for all of this.
Yeah.
And a very small minority, even in the schools, that identify in that way.
That's right. So there's more to become of this. There's more that's going to come out of this, more information, but this is an example of, I mean, ultimately sin that happens.
Right.
And we'll see what comes of all of this. And I hope that the schools, and I hope that other schools out there and other institutions, organizations, businesses see that what can happen when you allow this type of policy to occur, no matter where that is.
Right.
So I'm sure we'll see more here soon. A lot of attention on this, as there should be.
Yeah,
There
absolutely.
should be. So another thing that has a lot of attention, that's just Loudoun County. But something else that has a lot of attention these days is mandates. So, as we know, there was a mandate that came out on September 9th by the president. And we've talked about this before, but it came out that saying that it was an executive order requiring all federal employees to get a vaccination with it didn't seem any sort of, there was no test out option. So previously, before, people could get tested, and now there is no testing opt out. So it's just, you got to get the vaccine.
And
there are
no
exemptions.
either.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some exemptions that are there, but
Oh, okay.
that's at one point you could just get tested every week.
Right.
You didn't have to file an exemption.
Right.
So that came out September 9th. All federal employees must be vaccinated. Then that includes military members as well. And then they came out as well and said federal contracting companies would also. So any company that does contracts with the federal government would be required to put a mandate in place within their companies. So that includes defense contracting companies as well.
Oh, that includes even more than that, but
It does.
Yeah.
But it definitely includes defense contractor companies as well. And so they put out this on September 24th, Safer Federal Workforce Task Force Safety Guidelines for federal contractors and subcontractors. And it is actually quite an extensive document.
I was
think
going to
we've
say
got,
that
what,
looks like a
12
lot of
pages there?
pages.
13, 14 pages long.
Wow.
Q&A section in there. That's actually the longest part of it. But it essentially mandates that you must have a vaccination mandate within your company by December 8th, I should say. And obviously, it's created a lot of stir. I think in the same press conference, the president came out and said that all companies that have 100 employees or more must mandate vaccinations, and said that he was going to use OSHA to do that. Now, the thing is, at this point, it's been a month. It's been over a month since that he came out and said that. And apparently this was under emergency pretense. So I don't know how you can wait a month after a supposed emergency that this came out of and still try to continue to push that for companies that are 100 employees or more.
Right.
So there's no mandate for companies 100 or more. There's no law.
Well, and his executive order can't technically dictate to private companies.
Well, that's why he's going to use OSHA. So that's not an executive order. That's nothing right now. He was going to use the Occupational Health Organization, OSHA, to do that, to basically require that as a health, basically providing a safe environment.
So
you
they
have
were
to
trying
require
to add a new process or
a new policy.
into OSHA law, basically.
That's right.
How?
Right.
I know you probably don't know this answer, but how does OSHA end up getting its policies and laws enacted? I mean, how doesn't that have to go through certain branches and processes to have things added to it?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it's who makes laws? Congress.
Congress, yeah.
Congress makes laws. Now, there is a law that stood up OSHA and provided its, and I don't have the details in front of me, but
Like
that
I said,
provided the
it's
actual responsibilities of that organization
Right.
and what it does. But again, who makes laws?
Congress.
Congress makes laws. And there is no law right now that says you must get a vaccination.
Right, they're all mandates, which aren't laws, and
the
executive
only thing
orders
that-
can only do so much, and mandates.
Right, because according to the way that our country was established, our form of government in the Constitution, the president has the ability to control the executive branch, which is where we get the term executive order from.
Right.
He's providing an order for just the executive branch. He can only give direction to just the executive branch, and
Which
that's
would
all.
be only federal
That's right.
employees and
And not all federal employees necessarily. That's why some people have pointed out and said, well, Congress is exempt for this. Well, of course Congress is exempt from it because he does no control over Congress.
right.
Now, what is interesting is that I've heard some things that some White House staff have been exempted from this.
And there was a couple other things, not branches, but segments of the federal employees that were also, like the postal workers, were exempt. And that's because they have
A union.
they have a union. So any of the ones with a union, you can't just walk in there and change their work environment without going through the union first and negotiating and getting things approved. So, yeah, good luck.
Right. And that's what's creating such turmoil right now.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a lot of people who are saying we're not open to getting the vaccine.
Right.
And they're pushing back. They're pushing back within their companies. And again, there's several different aspects here. There's no blanket mandate that's been put out. There is one for federal employees. There's one for military members, which is the same thing, and federal contracting companies that have come out.
Right. They'll pull the funding on the contracting companies if those companies do not comply.
Well, right, what they're going to do is they'll put an additional clause within your contract that says you must comply with this document here, which is the COVID-19 workplace safety guidance.
Right.
So they're going to reference this, which creates some concern because who gets to decide what changes in this? And who gets to decide what's fully vaccinated mean?
Right.
Because we're hearing things about booster shots. You got to get a booster shot. Well, okay, so they might add that in here.
Right.
Okay,
with
well, now
every
fully
subsequent
vaccinated.
one.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can just change this. You can point to it in the contract and then just constantly change this and update it, which is what will happen.
It will, because that's the way they're manipulating it.
So there's, I think, a couple of things that we need to think through about this whole mandate issue. First, we have this principle issue, first and foremost. We have freedoms, we have liberties, we have individual liberties within our country, things that are not granted. We want to be clear about that. These are not granted by the federal government. Rather, they are protected by the Constitution, right?
Right.
They're inalienable rights. They're given to us by God, right? That's what the founders in our founding documents were outlining, was that they didn't say the government is granting rights, but rather we're affirming the rights that God has already given to all mankind.
Right. Yeah.
And so the Constitution was there to protect that and to preserve that. The federal government is there to protect and to preserve those individual liberties. But what we're seeing is that they're not. They are saying that, no, you must get this, that you have to comply. So there is a principle there. Before we even get into the practical, because there's certainly practical implications of doing this that we're already seeing within our economy and within businesses, the challenges that they're not facing as a result. But there's a principle first and foremost about this that should actually drive the decision, not just the practical aspects of things. Otherwise, we just become a bunch of pragmatists, and that's it. And we were actually at an event a couple of, well, it's actually been a couple of weeks now. Well, actually, maybe it's a month, where I thought Ben Carson actually said it best.
Yeah.
When we were there. So we're going to remind ourselves, and for those that weren't there, of, maybe if we can get this to play. So here's Ben Carson in Loudoun County, of all places.
You see, we are failing in that right now. You have government encroachment. This whole concept of mandates, this is a problem. Because it's a slippery slope. And if the people, like sheep, gently follow their leaders and just do whatever they say, believe me, there'll be more and more mandates as time goes on. That's what we have to be careful of. Now, if you want people to take the vaccine, then you got to give them the true information about vaccines. People are mature enough to make good decisions, but when you try to manipulate them, they become suspicious. You know, for instance, we now know from the Cleveland Clinic studies and the Israeli studies that natural immunity that you gain from having the virus is much better than the immunity that you get from vaccination. Much better. And yet, the government, the CDC, won't even acknowledge natural immunity. Now that makes people highly suspicious. And you've probably noticed, if you know some people who've had the virus and then gotten an immunization shot, that they seem to have a little more problems with it. Of course they would, because they've already got the antibodies circulating, and now you inject something that the antibodies react to very strongly. And we don't know what that reaction will be further down the line, particularly with spike proteins integrating into cellular structures. And so this is still still something that we're experimenting with.
So, what was your first thought to that when we heard that?
Oh, one, we're all guinea pigs in the sight of the government at the moment, but thank goodness we have done some research ourselves and not followed along like sheep.
Well, I mean, you know, people should be free to get the vaccine.
Oh, absolutely. It's their choice, and there's no reason to take that away. We each have our freedoms. Wear a mask, get a vaccine. Don't. We're responsible for ourselves, and we need to stop relying on the government and other people telling us how to stay safe and stay alive, even though it doesn't feel like you're really alive sometimes when they're telling you what to do. So, just my 2 cents, I guess.
Yeah, well, I think what he was saying about the principle of mandates and the government wanting to constantly push and tell people what they can and cannot do instead of allowing them to have the freedom to make the choice. And I thought what he said there about education was particularly important.
Right.
Because right now people are skeptical of the vaccine because things about it are not clear. Information is not clear about what exactly is in it, what exactly the effects are.
Right.
And people have the right to know what they're being encouraged to put into their bodies.
Right.
And one thing in particular that I thought was interesting is how, over the last, I guess, decade, particularly maybe even in the last 5 years, there has been a really big surge in people concerned about what goes into their food.
Oh, their food, their vitamins, their
Right, everything.
everything. There are
Right.
a lot of label readers, and that's why you have more organic stuff coming out in the grocery stores. I mean, one of my favorite places to go is the grocery store. And so much, even in the last 2 years, of my favorite grocery store has changed, and they're adding more and more organic. And I know that, anyways, I'll just leave that there. But yes, so many people are so big on what they're putting in their bodies through their food and vitamins, but then when it comes to these things, they're not questioning it, or at least a lot aren't.
Well, but would you say that all those different things, the reason why people have gotten to the point of wanting to see what's in it, what's in their food, is because they've been educated, right? I mean, doctors, other nutritionists, things like that have come out with information. They've written articles. They've published in medical journals. There's all this information, right? They've done studies, right? A lot of funded studies by universities and other institutes and things like that, right? So there's been a ton of information that has just come out.
Right.
And we have the ability as individuals to go out on the internet, to go look on social media if that's where you get your information. All of those different places that we have, the people can go out and they can educate themselves. They can read for themselves and make a personal decision on the basis of what they are reading and what they believe to be true.
Right.
And now all of a sudden, it seems like we want to almost block information, that information is being censored, so that, and not being willingly given, so that people can make a decision.
Right.
And I mean, as Christians, we should be always seeking out the truth. We should always want to get information about a particular position, we make decisions on the basis of understanding the truth.
Right. Always asking questions about
But we're
things.
truth seekers.
Right.
That's what we should be doing.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing now to cause people to question is, hey, we're not seeing the information. We want to see. We want to understand. We want to know what trials have been done. What potential side effects do we have?
Well, what's been put in it?
Right.
You know, you're talking about, we care about what's been put into our bodies through our foods and things like that. What's in these vaccines? What's being hidden? Because
Because that's what it seems like, is
it
that there's
does.
something being hidden.
Right.
And that's why we don't see all the information
Right.
that's coming out. Or we have different opinions that are coming out of the international community that we are not being able to see unless you know exactly where to go.
Right. There's so much conflicting information as well. You have some doctors, nurses, practitioners, they're saying, this is great, it's all good. And then you have others. I mean, you have nurses that are quitting because they don't want to take the vaccine. Why? Why are they saying don't get it? Why are there other doctors and things like that opposing? There's so many opposing sides on this. So what's going on?
Yeah, that's right. So there is a principle issue, and we want to be able to educate people. People need to be educated. And like President Carson was saying, the more you push and the less information you want to put out, the more hesitant people are going to be to get it.
Yep.
And I think that is a reasonable thing for people to ask for.
Yeah.
That's a reasonable thing for Christians to ask for, to say, look, if you're expecting me to take this, I want the information. I have the right to see that information,
Right.
to be an informed citizen, to be an informed individual who knows exactly what is going into this,
Yeah.
so that I can make a personal decision.
Right. Especially when you find out certain things are in it and it goes against your religious beliefs to use those type of ingredients.
So let's talk about that for a minute. What do we know is it? I mean, there's been discussion, and I think maybe even some evidence to show that there are potentially aborted fetuses were used in the germline
Right.
to develop
Gene
it.
sequences from aborted fetuses potentially used in trial versions or well, I mean, it's all experimental, so who knows which ones made any of the lots? We don't know. They're not giving that information, and so we can't, as Christians, make a sound decision on whether or not we want to use and get the vaccine because they're blocking and censoring that information
Yeah, and
to not make a big stink.
right, and that for a Christian goes against our conscience.
Right.
I mean, I remember one of the big debates that has always been there. It hasn't been discussed as much in recent years, but particularly when the abortion debate first came to light was, well, what would happen if you found some cure for some disease as a result of aborted fetuses? What if you discovered a cure for cancer, right? I mean, this is when it came down to determining, well, how should we use aborted fetuses since abortion is already legal? If somebody, if we have these cells anyway, shouldn't we just go ahead and use them to do research to find cures for different diseases like cancer?
Right. And they're doing it. They have done
Sure.
it.
But the question is, could a Christian then, in good conscience, like where does that slippery slope end? Because if you do the research and you finally do find that there's a cure for cancer, that there would be an awfully big temptation for somebody to say, well, my wife, my husband, my grandmother, mother, father, whatever, best friend has cancer, and they're going to die. And, I'm against abortion, but this may save their life, and that child was already aborted anyway, and I couldn't have stopped it, so therefore, let's go ahead and do the treatment.
Right, but then you're just still justifying the act of continuing to abort.
Right. And if it's found, and this is part of the problem, we don't know 100% guarantee that aborted fetuses were not used in the production of the vaccine. That would go against a Christian conscience
Right.
to say, well, if there's even anything there, I can't be a part of it.
Right.
If there's even the possibility, then I can't be a part of it. Right? That would be true whether there was a vaccine mandate in place or not.
Right.
If there was no mandate, and let's say all the information was out there, but they couldn't even guarantee that it wasn't used, aborted fetuses weren't used in the development,
And
then
why would they deny it if it was, or if it wasn't? If it wasn't, why wouldn't they tell
or show evidence
or
of
show
it.
evidence of it not being in there? So that just makes you think they're hiding it.
It does lead you to think that, for sure.
Right.
And so we have a couple of issues for Christians in particular from a principle perspective here, right? I mean, one, we have freedoms, and we have a freedom issue that we need to be concerned about.
Right. Constitutional
Individual
freedoms.
liberty, right, constitutionally protecting people's individual liberties to decide. But then we also have a freedom of conscience perspective from a Christian worldview in particular.
Yeah.
That says that I can't do anything that violates my conscience, in this case, potential for development of these using aborted fetuses, which would really, we should be calling it what it is, I guess, which is
Murder.
the murder of children.
Right.
So we have a principle issue, but we also have some practical aspects of all of this too that we're seeing as a result of people's principles. And I'm glad to see that people are standing up for their principle in different places.
Yeah.
And it is having an impact.
It's having a pretty good impact on a lot of people, actually.
And on the economy.
Oh, the economy, yeah.
And so I want to play one more video here of something that was said today by the White House press secretary.
So I know there was a little hubbub over the course of the last few days about Southwest Airlines. We now know that some of those claims were absolutely false, and actually the issues were completely unrelated to vaccine mandates. But again, what we've seen business to business across the country is this is the way to save lives, create more certainty. It's good for the economy, and it's something we're looking forward to implementing.
So apparently vaccines are good for the economy.
Apparently. I didn't realize that, especially with the survival rate of, what is it, 0.09, something like that.
Yeah. We look at that and we're saying that, or she is saying, that it's good for the economy. But what we're finding is that it's not good for the economy.
Right.
Because look at where the economy is right now.
Yeah.
And partly because people are saying no, and they would rather leave their job, they would rather be fired than go along with a mandate.
Right.
It's having a big impact to the economy. There was a really good article that, a commentary piece that came out of the Heritage Foundation that talked a little bit about this and some of the impact that they're having. You've got several organizations that have come out and said, yeah, there is actually no impact, but they did a really good job of actually putting together a couple of very specific things that are impacting the economy. Quote, if Biden's mandate forces just 10% of targeted workers to quit, that could mean millions more unfilled positions. Think about that, 10% of the workforce. That's millions and millions of people.
Yep.
Here's some very specific ones. Texas hospital faces closing down altogether as it expects 25% of its employees could quit over a vaccine mandate. It's 25%
Of healthcare
of
workers.
healthcare workers that I thought that we couldn't afford to lose in the middle of a pandemic.
You would think that those would be the last people you would want to lose.
Right. You would think that it wouldn't matter. Like, if they don't want to get the vaccine, fine. We need them.
Well, and you would think that if they wanted to get it, they've had how many months since January to actually get it?
In addition to that, National Guard is being deployed to drive school buses in Massachusetts
Oh, that's a
amid a
great
critical
tax dollar.
shortage of drivers.
Yeah, that's a great use of our tax dollars.
Amazon is paying $3,000 signing bonuses for warehouse workers. Police departments are paying $15,000 sign-on bonuses.
Wow.
We've seen fast food restaurants, right? I mean, we've seen signs out there. McDonald's is giving $500 sign-on bonuses. Some family-owned restaurants are giving $1,200.
Or iPhones. I've seen iPhones as a sign-on perk.
iPhone. Wow.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, most iPhones are around $1,000. So,
right.
a couple other statistics here. Currently, a record 10.9 million. That's million unfilled jobs in America. I mean, if you want a job, you can get a job.
Oh, absolutely.
Nationwide, that's 1 in 12 jobs is currently unfilled. According to U.S. Chamber of Commerce, more than 90% of local chambers say labor shortages are holding them back, while more than 90% of associated economists say businesses are struggling to find workers. I can personally attest to that. The Wall Street Journal several weeks ago detailed shortages at grocery shelves across the country, and we're seeing some of those pictures come out.
We have, yeah.
Grocery chain executives now say shortages are so bad as those in the spring of 2020 when hoarding wiped shelves clean.
Right now it's supply distribution, actually, with all the cargo ships held up in the ports and
Right.
truckers and
Well, and they're being held up out there because of the stringent policies at the ports
right,
because of COVID restrictions.
right.
And, I don't know of specific organizations, companies that are requiring a vaccine that are related to dock workers and things like that, but I'm sure they exist. And I'm sure that people are concerned about it. But even just the mandates, or not the mandates, but the, well, I guess they maybe are mandates, but the guidance that they're being told that the policies they have to follow are just creating a backlog.
Right.
I mean, there's ships that are literally just sitting out there. They've been out there for months.
Well,
some
and
of
now
them.
they're looking to do, some of these companies are looking to do private charter things to go get their goods off the ships and get them to the port or somewhere to be able to be trucked or,
That's right. There's an article that came out in the Wall Street Journal. It was, I think, 2 days ago.
Yeah.
I think I posted it up on Twitter and on Facebook. And I'm trying to remember the amount of money that it costs, how many times more it costs to do the charter.
I
It's like
think
4 or 5
I read
times,
it. And
maybe more.
I think I read it, and it would normally cost, before it was $5,000
For a container.
for a container,
Right.
and now it's $16,000 for a
Right,
container.
that's for a container, but when you switch to charter, which is completely
I think
different.
it's I think it said it was
It's like
five
five times the amount, like 60,000, I think, or something.
Right.
For the same amount. But that's what they're doing to get around this. Big corporations, Walmart, Costco,
Amazon.
they'll be able to do that. But your normal mom and pop, local business, will not be able to do that.
Right.
They will not be able to. So because you have big companies that will pass on their cost, their additional cost, they'll pass along some of those, so your goods will go up some. But they're not going to pass all of them on necessarily, because then they know that they can't they won't be able to sell it. So the cost at which a small company would have to charge to recover that costs, they know they would never be able to sell it.
Right,
So it'd
like
just
the
be a waste of
the
money.
big box store, let's just say Walmart. If I think I saw there was a bottle of lotion on the news, or somebody posted and they were changing out the price tags, and it was $6.99 for the small bottle of moisturizer, and now it's $10.99. At the big box store, it's $10.99, but like you're saying, at the mom and pop store, it'd probably have to be about 15
Right.
because of what it would cost for them, or they're just not going to have it on the shelves anyway
That's right.
because they can't get it.
That's right. But they are doing that in order to get around all of this because of what they're having to go through. Because then you can bypass the ports, the main port shipping process that you would go through.
Right, and you notice
through
how this
charters.
is happening at the busiest shopping season of the year, right?
Right.
Christmas time and Thanksgiving, it's all
Well, we're
happening.
still not sure whether we're going to be allowed to have Christmas, remember?
Try me. No.
I think we're still having Christmas, folks. So let's see a couple other things. One, Indianapolis Pizzeria faced a 60% jump in pepperoni prices in just 5 weeks.
60%.
60%.
So ordering pizza is going to be really expensive.
That's right. It'll be $60 for a piece of pizza. He goes on, supply chain executives lament near-term labor prospects, with one reporting, quote, people cannot get the labor back, whether that's working in the warehouse or somebody with a commercial driver's license, end quote, which is what you mentioned about even truck drivers. Last month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported the biggest one-month jump in the prices of staples such as eggs, bread, and milk since 1974, now rising at an annualized 8.7% rate. That's 0.7% month over month. The rise in meat prices was nearly twice that rate, approaching 20% annualized. Wholesale inflation, meanwhile, rose 8.3% from a year ago, the highest rate since 2010, and following a record rise the previous month. Inflation expectations are now becoming entrenched among the public. On September 13th, the New York Federal Reserve released its survey showing American households expect inflation will continue at 5.2% for this year, a record high for the series, and will remain elevated for at least the next 3 years.
That's just about the time of the next election
So
and swap over.
I'm sure it has nothing to do with that at all. But according to Jen Psaki, White House press secretary, this has no impact on the economy whatsoever.
Oh, yeah. She's been
No
so
impact.
truthful and forthcoming.
I mean, people, I hope, start to see that there actually is an impact and you're living through it. And if you're not living through it and you're not seeing it in your place, well, just wait, because it's going to come.
Right.
It's going to come to your town, your city. I mean, we were just in Atlanta, and in Atlanta, there were a lot of people sitting around doing nothing.
There were. And even the restaurants we were going to, and that they were all short-staffed or short-supplied. A typical dinner at a restaurant wouldn't take 2.5 hours to get through, but from the time that we sat down to the time that we would get our check, it was taking a very long time. And trust me, we're being patient because we understand that there are the short staffings, and that when the waitresses come to the table twice and gone, we don't have onion rings, we don't have potatoes, or, you know, we had a couple of things. They're like, we're completely out of these. You go, okay, well, what's the next thing that you do have? You roll with it. But at some point, everybody's going to get frustrated, and they're starting to see it in their pocketbooks. that it's costing more, the detriment to the economy on this. The vaccine is causing a detriment to the economy because of what they're requiring.
Yeah, and certainly we had some of that is residual from just the COVID mandates and,
Right.
People having to wear masks. They don't want to wear masks, or they don't feel comfortable going to a restaurant or to different places. Although I will say that if you look at what has happened now as a result of football season starting up, they're all over the place. We're packing stadiums with 60,000 people.
Right.
We're having marathons that people are in close quarters with one another as they start the marathon. So it's not just from that.
Right.
It's also because we're starting to see mandates. And we're also saw where the government was giving people money, more money to basically not work than if they were getting paid to do their job.
Right.
And so when we look at that from a biblical worldview too, anything the government does to encourage people not to work is never a good idea.
Right.
I mean, we were designed to work.
We were.
We
Absolutely.
weren't designed to just sit around and do nothing. Right? I mean, what's the old phrase that idle hands are the devil's workshop?
Yeah.
Right? Is that for a reason? It's not just a saying. It actually had some truth behind it, and it still does.
Right. Absolutely.
And so we shouldn't be, as Christians, endorsing or encouraging any sort of policy that would take away. You want to talk about mandates, let's talk about the Christian mandate. Let's talk about what the Genesis mandate of working. That is a true mandate.
That is.
And that's a mandate that's given by God. And so why would we encourage anybody,
Right. It's the highest mandate.
right? Why would we encourage people to not work? Why would we get behind and endorse policies that encourage people not to work, to not go out and get a job?
Right.
I mean, here we are we were in Atlanta, and there was restaurants we'd go into that had tons of tables open. But we had a 20, 30, 40-minute or longer waiting list to get in, to get a table, not because there wasn't space, but because they didn't have enough workers.
Right. And you can't spread your service too thin.
Right. But yet, there were tons of people out on the streets
Yeah.
that we saw doing nothing. So it's having a big impact on the economy. We went from one of the best economies that we've had in a long time to now trending towards to be one of the worst economies
Right. I
that
mean,
we've
we're
had in a very long time.
we're trending back towards the 70s, which a long time ago, but it was really bad.
Right. So it does have an impact. We also, not just restaurants, vehicles. We had an incident just down there in Georgia where we needed to get a rental car temporarily. Couldn't get one because there's no rental cars. Needed to get a loaner car from the dealer for our car that needed to be in the shop for a day. Where typically, because of the warranty, we would have gotten a loaner car.
Right.
Right? And we're not talking about, some mom and pop car sales place. We're talking about,
A very large brand.
right, large brand that comes from Germany that I won't say which one it is. But you never would have a problem getting a loaner car.
Right.
But we had 4 dealerships in the greater Atlanta area all tell us, no, we can't give you a loaner car.
Right.
Why? Because they have cars that need semiconductors, chips. That's all they need is the chips. That goes for all car manufacturers right now, whether that's Chevy, Ford, Toyota, Audi, BMW, Mercedes. All of them are having difficulty getting those chips. And some cars, depending on which one you buy, have anywhere from 100 to 200 chips per car, per vehicle, right? Every little sensor, everything that you have, which is most new cars today have a lot of sensors in them.
Makes you want to
require
go
that.
back to the old cars.
Yeah, let's we do that.
I was
so-
telling my dad I hope his antiques are good to go.
That's right. That might be the only thing you have. So we're seeing a hit to the economy as a result of this. And there's other issues behind the semiconductors and the chips that that we could talk about, but
For the
there's
sake
a lot
of time.
trickle down impacts as a result of that. But the issue is that it is having an impact on the economy, and we're seeing that. We're seeing it firsthand. If you're listening to this, you probably are also seeing that happen firsthand. We saw that big part of that happen, particularly about vaccinations,
Right.
just yesterday and the day before. Southwest Airlines.
Right.
Southwest Airlines, of course, they came out and they said, well, it wasn't because of a vaccine mandate. It was because of weather. Well, now, most of us know that it wasn't because of weather.
No,
People were
because nobody
confirming.
else was canceling flights.
That's right. Thousands of flights were canceled with Southwest when you were in the, I think, tens of digits with the other ones. You didn't even get up to 3 digits cancellations for the other airlines in the same period of time.
Right.
So, and we've actually seen, I guess, notes, messages, videos, text messages, things that are coming out from people who are Southwest Airlines pilots and aircrew who are saying that the reason why there are delays and cancellation of flights was because the workforce is taking time off because they know that they could potentially be fired.
Right.
And so they're taking their time off now. All of their saved up time, they're taking it now because they know that they will lose it.
Right.
And yet, Southwest says that that wasn't the reason. The CEO of Southwest actually came on Good Morning America this morning, and this is what he said.
And the vaccine mandate obviously is controversial, and it's not anything that I wish for our company. This is a government mandate. It's a presidential order, and we're doing our best to comply with that according to the deadlines that have been set. We're not going to fire any employees over this. We're urging all of our employees to get vaccinated. If they can't get vaccinated, we're urging them to seek an accommodation. So, we'll do everything we can to support our people here.
Are you going to need to add employees to deal with the holiday crush?
Okay, so there you have the CEO of Southwest basically saying it wasn't because of a mandate. It wasn't because of the vaccination mandate. Now, I do appreciate the fact that he did say that they were going to provide accommodations for people who didn't want to get it. What I don't understand is why he's saying that, well, it's a government mandate, it's out there, we have to comply. Well, I don't remember a bill being passed by Congress requiring that everybody get a vaccination, that businesses all require their employees to get a vaccination.
Are airlines subsidized any by the government?
No.
Okay.
Amtrak is,
Oh, okay.
of which we've seen things about that as
Right.
well, Amtrak requiring vaccinations. Did you know that actually not all of the airlines are requiring a vaccination? So this was in the Atlanta Journal. United Airlines became the first to require it back in August for all of their employees. Delta is only making new hires be vaccinated,
That's interesting.
but not existing. Existing employees, so if you work for Delta right now, then if you do not get the vaccination, you are charged $200 a month health insurance surge charge. You have to take a weekly COVID-19 test. It doesn't say it here, but I think you probably have to pay for that yourself. And you must wear a mask. So that's Delta. But Southwest Airlines is requiring everybody to get a vaccination. But yet you have the CEO saying, well, this is a mandate, this is required. Well, if it was required, then wouldn't Delta be requiring it? Instead, they're providing an alternative, which is, well, you don't have to get the vaccination.
Right.
You can get weekly testing. You can wear a mask. Well, wait a minute. I thought you're saying that it's required. So it's clearly not a mandate that everybody has to get this, and that everybody who works in the airline industry has to get it.
Yeah.
So while I am glad that he's providing accommodation, and they don't want to see anybody leave, that's what he's saying. Obviously, Southwest employees think there's something different going on there.
They obviously do, because they're continuing to cancel more and more flights.
Right. So if you work in a company, though, if you have any sort of influence over your company's policy, then accommodation should be what you should advocate for.
Right.
That is a good thing, because people should be able to get a religious exemption. As we've said before, there's a principle there. There's principles there that Christians should apply, that individuals, even if you're not a Christian, should apply. That has to do with your freedom of conscience.
Yep.
To choose to not do this. And then obviously there's just the overall liberty and freedom that we have to make a choice on our own.
Right.
So this is going to continue. I don't think it's going to get better. I think it's going to get worse. That's what we're seeing. Unless people start standing up. Unless people start standing up and using the arguments, right? It doesn't help us to just scream and yell, and that's it.
No, there needs to be action, peaceful action, but still there needs to be action.
But also logic.
Right.
Use logical arguments
Right.
to reason.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we're seeing a lot of people just be unreasonable about, there's no, the pretense for the mandates themselves are not logical. They're not reasonable. But we should try to use reason. And I think using that logic, using that reasonableness with other people, get them to understand and to see why this is an affront on our freedoms and on our liberties. And at what point do we end up stopping it and saying we're not going to do any more? Because what will happen is it'll just continue. Take this little thing away, then we take a little bit more away, we take a little bit more away, and before you know it, there are no more freedoms.
Right.
How much longer before we're told, well, you have to get it's just for your companies, it's just for your businesses. And then it's just so that you, now it's for if you want to leave the country. Now if you want to leave the state. Well, now if you want to leave your county. Look at Canada. Canada has already come out and said they won't let you leave the entire country unless you get vaccinated, and that includes if you're a visitor.
And the only place that you can go that you're not vaccinated it's either Canada or California. Either one is the grocery store. You can go to the grocery store if you're unvaccinated, but everything else you have to have your vaccination card and show it, or the app that has the vaccination QR code or something like that. But that's very German-esque to a certain time
slope.
To needing your papers to be able to travel and go anywhere, to even cross certain lines.
And how much longer before, well, you can't go to church because you're not vaccinated. I think it's coming. I think all of these things are coming, unless we actually stand up and say, no, we're not gonna tolerate being told what we can and can't do on the basis of this.
Right.
And we're gonna have to be willing to have difficult conversations.
Right.
We're going to have to be able to have conversations that matter, which is what we do here. We have conversations that matter. I think we've had a lot of conversations tonight on some things that matter. But very difficult times. The hope that we do have is, obviously, we know who is reigning, who's in ultimate control of all things. But, all right.
Good night, everybody.
I think that does it. Thanks for tuning into The Right Stuff Matters. We will see you next time on The Right Stuff Matters.